Hello, Stuart Bonning. Thank you for joining us today. Bonning Property. I like to look at it, you work in the commercial space, similar to myself. I work in residential, but you cover all things commercial as an advisor. And that also includes perhaps working for or representing, I should say, a commercial tenant, or reviewing a portfolio, purchasing, negotiating, all of those aspects in that commercial field. So thank you for joining us today and sharing your pearls of wisdom.
A pleasure, Tanya.
It's good to see you. Look, today we're talking about the here and now tenant issues, and you're really at the grassroots level. I'd love to hear your take on what you see the tenancy issues are and what that tenancy in commercial, that space, is looking like for you at the moment.
Wow, that's a very broad question.
I guess. You can drill it down.
Okay, yeah. Well, look, the small business retail tenant, I've seen a lot of, I've heard a lot of commentary from friends that own commercial property businesses in recent weeks where tenants have just disappeared, literally turned off their mobile phones and locked the doors.
Right.
And not necessarily tenants that have been told they have to lock the doors by the government. It might be simply because their demand has fallen off a cliff. So there's a lot of pain and a lot of uncertainty with the smaller and medium-sized businesses, I think, out there in the retail space. So a lot of what I've been doing in recent weeks is for tenants that I've acted for, and there's typically I'll be out there in the market looking for space, shortlisting, and then negotiating the lease terms if I'm getting retained by a tenant. A lot of those clients have come to me seeking direction on how they deal with their landlord. And I've got to say, I feel unusually a level of sympathy for the state and federal governments in this period, because they've been what I call, it's been legislation on the run, trying to morph the way that you deal with tenants and landlords collectively in this environment. It's unprecedented. So that's been really interesting, working through all that in the last few weeks. And so on the tenant side, as I mentioned before, navigating that on their behalf and looking at the Code of Conduct, which is a document issued about 3.5 weeks ago, and that's since been superseded by the omnibus regulations that have come through last Friday. And there's been a lot of sort of nuances and contradictions in the drafting, and trying to sit down and read through that and then be confident, I know how to deal now, going to your tenant, and then the next day the situation has changed by degrees. I don't envy the government in this current environment. It's been very challenging. So that's trying to give you a quick snapshot how it's been with tenants. Very challenging for a lot of businesses. Not telling you anything you probably don't already know in that sense, but the interpretation of regulations has been tricky.
And are you advising any particular pathway for tenants to take at this point? I know it's a very generic question and a broad question, but
it's a great question. I think yes. Long before it was issued in the Code of Conduct, I've been advocating full transparency. If a tenant wants to go to a landlord, in my universe, the tenant-landlord relationship is a partnership, and some parties choose to make that an adversarial sort of a relationship, which I think is counterproductive for both. So on tenants' behalf, I've been encouraging going in on the front foot and demonstrating where possible what your revenue looks like compared to, say, this time last year, and having that tangible, transparent conversation with your landlord to say, we're suffering, this is what our numbers look like at the moment. We've had to retrench X number of staff, or we've laid off staff here, and we've done whatever we can do cost cutting wise. We need your help if we are to get through this. And that's been, I think, a really important message that I've been giving to my clients as tenants, to have those conversations early and with transparency, and then you get a much more efficient response mostly.
And there's a couple of different pathways that are on the table, or options. One is the rent reduction, obviously, and one is the deferral. You're seeing either pathway sort of favoured at this point?
That's a really good question. The government's chosen to define them as waiver or deferral. So waiver is a complete discount of rent that you'll never recover,
Yes.
whereas deferral is by inference put off for a period and then you'll recover it later. When I'm acting for tenants, it depends on the severity of impact that a tenant's had. I've got a smaller retail tenant at the moment that we've asked for a full waiver of 65% of the rent, because that's legitimately how much their turnover has fallen in the space of 6 weeks. If I'm wearing the tenant hat, I'm still trying to bring a sense of reasonableness to it. If a tenant's revenue has dropped, say, 30%, then we might seek to have half of that or all of that in a waiver, but then a further amount in deferral, just to help them to ride through the storm. You'd rather, put off some costs if you can and pick it up later. Now, the way the regulations work now is whatever the period of deferral is, you get that added on to your lease term at the other end, or you have the right to if you want to as a tenant. So it's been, I suppose, to circle back to your question, Tonya, it's been a bit of a cocktail, depending on the severity of impact with the tenant's business.
Yeah, so that's great. So your role is really understanding all the avenues of negotiation and putting together the right pathway for the client that utilises the right methods, whether it be waiver or the reduction, and getting an outcome that is, well, I want to use the term, and I will, fair for all parties concerned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, that's fantastic. It's a great little insight. It's a great start to our video chats that we're going to have, our online chats. So I thank you for joining me today, and I really look forward to chatting next time. You're going to be talking about yields and all things around that. So I look forward to seeing you next time.
It's a pleasure, Tonya. Thank you.
Thanks.